Jake Morrison stared at the small screen showing the distress signal from Kepler 442b. The message was short and broken. Research station going dark. Strange readings. Help needed now. That was 3 days ago, and nothing since then. Jake ran, his hand through his dark hair, and looked around the bridge of his ship called Defiance Edge. His crew was small but good. 6 people he trusted with his life. Lisa Grant was fixing something under a control panel. She was the best engineer Jake had ever worked with. Her red hair was always messy because she was always working on something. Tony Blake sat at the weapons station cleaning his rifle. He was quiet but deadly when things got bad. Amy Wells was reading medical reports in the corner. She was young but smart and could fix any wound. Ryan Cross was plotting their course to the research station. He never got lost in space. Sam Porter was listening to radio signals, trying to hear something from the station. He could hear whispers in space that others missed. The trip to Kepler 442b took 2 days. When they got close, Jake could see the research station floating in space. It looked normal from the outside. All the lights were on. The solar panels were working, but no one answered their calls. Jake felt something cold in his stomach. This was wrong. They put on their spacesuits and flew over to the station in a small shuttle. The docking bay was empty and quiet. Their boots made loud sounds on the metal floor. Jake pulled out his gun and the others did the same. The air in the station was good to breathe, but it smelled wrong, like something had died. They moved through, the halls looking for the research team. There should have been 12 people working here. The first body they found was in the main lab. It was Dr. Helen Ross. Jake had met her before. She was a good scientist who studied alien life, but now she was dead and her body was torn apart. There were strange bite marks on her arms and legs. Lisa bent down to look at the body. "The wounds are not from any animal I know," she said. Tony kept watching the doors with his rifle ready. More bodies were in the next room, all torn apart the same way. Amy checked each one, but they were all dead for at least 2 days. Sam found the main computer and started looking at the research data. The team had found something 3 weeks ago, he said. Some kind of signal from deep in the planet. They went down to investigate and brought something back. Jake looked at the computer screen. The last entry was from Dr. Ross. She wrote that the sample was moving and making sounds. Then the writing stopped. Ryan found the sample room. The door was broken open from the inside. Inside was a metal box that was supposed to hold the alien sample. The box was empty and had holes melted through it. Whatever was inside had gotten out. Jake was about to call his ship when the lights went out. Emergency power came on and everything was red. Then they heard the sounds, clicking and scratching coming from the walls. The sounds were getting closer. The first alien came around the corner fast. It was the size of a large dog but looked like a giant bug. It had 6 legs and claws that could cut metal. Its head had no eyes, but it moved like it could see everything. Tony shot it 3 times before it went down. But then more came. Lots more. They ran toward the shuttle bay, fighting the aliens as they went. The bugs were smart. They worked together to trap the humans in the halls. Lisa got cut on her arm but kept moving. Amy helped her while shooting at the aliens with her small gun. More aliens came from the air vents above them. Ryan got pulled down by one, and Jake had to shoot it off. Him. Sam got hurt bad when 3 aliens jumped on him at once. Jake and Tony got him free, but Sam was bleeding a lot. They made it to the shuttle bay, but the aliens had gotten there first. The shuttle was covered with the bugs. They had broken the engines and torn holes in the hull. There was no way to fly it back to their ship. Jake looked at his crew. They were all hurt and scared, but still fighting. He made a hard choice. "You need to get to the communication room," he told them. "Send a warning to Earth about these things. Tell them not to come. Here, I will hold them off." Lisa grabbed his arm. "We stay together," she said. But Jake shook his head. Someone has to warn Earth or more people will die. Go now. That is an order. His crew ran toward the communication room while Jake stayed to fight the aliens. There were so many of them now. Hundreds coming from every direction. He shot as many as he could, but his gun was getting hot. From the communication room, he heard Sam sending the message to Earth, warning about the alien bugs, telling Earth to stay away from Kepler 442b. Then he heard Amy scream. Then Tony's gun stopped shooting. Then Lisa was calling his name, but her voice got cut off. Jake was alone now. The aliens surrounded him, but they did not attack. They just watched him with their strange heads. One alien was bigger than the others. It came close to Jake and made sounds like talking. Jake did not understand the words, but he understood the meaning. They had let him live on purpose. They wanted him to see what they could do. They wanted him to be afraid. More ships were coming. Jake could hear them on his radio. Earth had sent help, but it was too late. His friends were dead. The aliens had won, but the warning had been sent. Maybe Earth would be ready for what was coming. Maybe his friends had not died for nothing. Jake sat down against the wall and waited for the rescue ships to arrive. The big alien watched him and made more sounds that might have been laughing. 3 months had passed since Jake lost his crew on Kepler 442b. He sat in the big meeting room on Luna Base, looking at the wall of screens. Each screen showed a different colony that had gone quiet. New Dallas was the first to go dark 2 weeks after his rescue. Then it was the mining stations on Europa. After that, the outer rim colonies stopped sending messages one by one. Admiral Kate Davis stood at the front of the room pointing at the star map. Her gray hair was pulled back tight and her face looked tired. She had not slept much in the past month. The red dots on the map showed where colonies had been lost. There were too many red dots now. We have lost contact with 47 colonies, she said. That is over 2 million people. The pattern is always the same. First they report strange readings, then they go quiet. When our ships arrive, they find the same thing Jake found. Bodies torn apart and no sign of the aliens. Dr. Ben Clark was looking at his computer. He was the best alien life expert that Earth had. His beard was getting gray from worry. The sample we got from Kepler 442b is not like anything we have seen, he said. It is not really one creature. It is part of something much bigger, like a single cell from a giant body. Colonel Mike Stone hit the table with his fist. He was in charge of all ground forces and he was angry. We should be fighting these things, not talking about them. Send in the Marines and kill every bug we can find. But Jake knew it was not that simple. He had seen how smart the aliens were, how they worked together, how they seemed to know what humans would do before humans did it. We cannot fight them the normal way, he said. They learn too fast. Every time we fight them, they get better at fighting us. Kate looked at him. Jake had become important in the past months. He was the only human who had faced the aliens and lived. Earth Command wanted to know everything he remembered about them. What do you think we should do? She asked. Jake stood up and walked to the star map. The red dots seemed to be moving in a pattern, like they were following some kind of plan. They are not just attacking random places, he said. Look at the pattern. They hit the research stations first, then the military bases, then the colonies with the most people. They are learning about us. Ben nodded. The quantum readings we are getting suggest they share information instantly. What one alien learns, they all learn, even across different star systems. It is like they are all part of one giant brain. That was the scary part. Jake remembered the big alien at the research station, how it had looked at him like it was thinking, like it was deciding what to do with him. They wanted me to live, he said. They could have killed me, but they did not. They wanted someone to see what they could do. More reports came in during the meeting. 3 more colonies had gone dark. The aliens were moving faster now, getting bolder. The outer rim was almost completely lost. Kate made the hard choice. We are pulling back all our ships to defend the core worlds: Earth, Mars, Luna, and the Jupiter colonies. Everything else we have to give up for now. Mike did not like this. We are just going to let them take everything he asked. What choice do? We have, Kate said. We have lost every battle so far. Our weapons barely slow them down. They are too fast and too smart. But Jake was thinking about something else. The big alien had made sounds at him. Sounds that might have been words. What? If they are not just animals, he said. What if they are trying to talk to us? Ben looked up from his computer. The brain scans of the sample show high intelligence. Maybe higher than human intelligence. But their communication is not like ours. They use quantum signals we cannot understand. Jake had an idea. It was crazy and dangerous, but it might work. What if I go back? He said. What if I try to talk to them? Everyone stared at him. Kate shook her head. That is suicide, Jake. We are not sending you back to those things, but Jake was already thinking about how to do it. They kept me alive before. Maybe they want something from us. Maybe we can make a deal. There is no deal with these things, Mike said. They are killers. They eat everything in their path. More alerts came in. The aliens had been seen near Saturn. They were getting closer to Earth. Time was running out. Jake looked at the faces around the table. Good people who were trying to save humanity. But they were thinking like soldiers and scientists. Maybe what was needed was someone who thought like the enemy. There is something else, he said. When I was at the research station, I felt something. Like the big alien was afraid of something. Like they were running from something worse than them. Ben looked interested. Running from what he asked. Jake closed his eyes and tried to remember. In the quantum readings from deep space, we sometimes pick up signals from the galactic center. Very old signals. What if these aliens are not from around here? What if they came from far away running from something? Kate was getting more reports. The aliens had taken the Mars orbital stations. They were inside human space now, moving toward Earth. We need to try something different, Jake said. The normal way of fighting is not working. Let me go to one of the captured ships. Let me try to understand what they want. It was a desperate plan. Maybe a stupid plan. But they were running out of choices. The aliens were too strong and too smart to fight with guns and ships. Kate looked at the star map one more time. The red dots were spreading like a disease. Soon there would be no blue dots left. All right, she said. But you are not going alone. We will give you the best stealth ship we have. And if things go bad, you get out fast. Jake nodded. He knew he was probably going to die. But his crew had died to send a warning to Earth. Maybe he could die to save it. The meeting ended and everyone went to prepare. Jake walked to the window and looked out at Earth. It looked peaceful from here, blue and white and beautiful. Soon the aliens would come for it. But Jake had a plan now. It was dangerous and might not work, but it was better than just waiting to die. He was going to find out what the aliens really wanted, and maybe find a way to stop them. In the distance, he could see ships moving toward the outer planets. The battle for humanity was about to begin. Jake floated in the small, stealth ship, watching the captured Earth vessel called New Horizon. 2 weeks ago, it had been a cargo ship carrying supplies to the outer colonies. Now it looked like something from a nightmare. The metal hull was covered with what looked like skin. Tubes and veins ran along the outside, pulsing with green light. It was still the same ship, but the aliens had changed it into something alive. His stealth suit made him invisible to most sensors. At least he hoped it did. The suit was new technology that bent light around him, but he did not know if it would work on alien sensors. He was about to find out. Jake pushed off from his ship and floated toward the New Horizon. Up close, the ship looked even worse. The metal was not just covered with alien skin. The skin had grown into the metal and changed it. Hull plates had become something like scales. Windows had become eyes that seemed to watch him as he moved. He found an airlock that was still partly metal. The alien skin had not covered it completely yet. Jake used his tools to open it quietly. Inside, the ship was warm and humid. The air smelled like something rotting. He could hear sounds deeper in the ship, clicking and scratching and something. That might have been singing. The hallways were not hallways anymore. The walls had grown together to make tunnels. The floor was soft and squishy under his boots. Green light came from veins in the ceiling that pulsed like a heartbeat. Jake had to crawl through some parts where the tunnel got narrow. He came to what used to be the cargo bay. Now it was a huge chamber filled with pods hanging from the ceiling. Each pod was the size of a person and made from the same skin that covered the ship. Through the thin walls of the pods, Jake could see shapes inside. Human shapes. Some of the people in the pods were still alive. He could see them breathing. Others were not moving. Jake wanted to try to free them, but he knew it would alert the aliens. He had to keep moving and hope he could save them later. Deeper in the ship, the changes were even stranger. Jake found rooms where the walls moved by themselves, breathing in and out like lungs. He found chambers filled with a thick liquid where alien larvae swam around. He found computers that had been grown into the ship instead of built. The organic computers were the most disturbing thing. They looked like giant brains connected to the ship systems with nerve fibers. Jake realized the aliens were not just using human technology. They were learning it, understanding it, making it part of themselves. He reached what used to be the bridge of the ship. Now it was a cathedral of flesh and metal. The ceiling was high and covered with hanging organs that pulsed with light. In the center was a throne made from bones and machinery. Sitting on the throne was the biggest alien Jake had ever seen. This alien was different from the ones at the research station. It was almost human-sized, but covered in hard plates like armor. Its head had features that looked almost like a face. When it saw Jake, it made sounds that were definitely words, even though Jake could not understand them. Jake took off his helmet so the alien could see his face. He held up his hands to show he was not carrying weapons. The big alien tilted its head and made more sounds. Other smaller aliens came out from hiding places around the room. They surrounded Jake, but did not attack. The big alien stood up and walked over to Jake. It reached out with one clawed hand and touched Jake's forehead. Suddenly, Jake could hear its thoughts, not in words but in images and feelings. The alien was showing him things. Jake saw the history of the aliens. They called themselves the Swarm. Long ago, they had been individual creatures like humans, but they had learned to connect their minds together. At first, it made them stronger and smarter, but over time, they lost the ability to think alone. They became one giant mind made of millions of bodies. The Swarm had traveled across the galaxy eating other civilizations, not because they were evil, but because they had to. They needed to grow and learn to survive. Every species they absorbed made them stronger, but it also made them more afraid. Jake saw what they were afraid of. In the center of the galaxy was something ancient and powerful, something that had driven the Swarm out of their home long ago. The Swarm had been running for thousands of years looking for a safe place to hide, but the ancient enemy was still out there waiting. The big alien showed Jake more images, Earth and the human colonies, but not as they were now. As they could become if humans joined the Swarm. Cities that were alive and could grow themselves, ships that could heal their own damage, people who could share thoughts and never be alone. But Jake also saw the cost. Humans would stop being human. They would become part of the Swarm mind. Individual thoughts and dreams would disappear. Everyone would think the same thoughts and want the same things. The alien stepped back and made sounds that Jake somehow understood. It was offering him a choice. Humans could join the Swarm willingly and keep some of their individual nature, or the swarm would take them by force and human nature would be lost completely. Jake looked around at the horrible living ship. At the pods with humans inside being slowly changed into something else. At the alien machines that had once been human technology. This was what the swarm offered. Safety at the cost of everything that made humans human. He thought about his crew. Lisa, with her messy red hair, always working on something new. Tony, quiet and deadly but loyal to his friends. Amy, young and smart and always trying to help others. Ryan, who never got lost because he always knew where he wanted to go. Sam, who could hear whispers in the dark that others missed. They had died as humans, fighting for something they believed in, living their own lives and making their own choices. That was what made them who they were. Jake looked at the big alien and spoke out loud, even though he knew it could read his thoughts. "You do not understand humans at all," he said. "We are not afraid of being alone. We are afraid of not being ourselves." The alien made angry sounds, and the smaller aliens moved closer. Jake knew he had made it mad, but he also knew something else. Now, the swarm was afraid. They had been running for so long they had forgotten how to do anything but survive. They saw humans as either food or fellow refugees, but humans were something else. Something the swarm had never met before. Humans could be individuals and work together at the same time. They could think their own thoughts and still care about others. That was something the swarm had lost long ago. Jake started backing toward the door. The aliens followed him, but they did not attack yet. The big alien was thinking about what Jake had said, maybe wondering if there was another choice besides joining or being eaten. Jake reached the tunnel and started running. Behind him, he could hear the aliens coming after him, but they were not moving as fast as they could, like they were giving him a chance to escape. He crawled through the tunnels as fast as he could. Behind him, the ship was waking up. The walls were moving and the lights were getting brighter. The new horizon was becoming fully alive now that the swarm knew there was an intruder. Jake reached his stealth ship and jumped inside. As he flew away, he looked back at the new horizon. It was beautiful in a horrible way, like a living sculpture, made of flesh and metal and dreams. But Jake had learned what he needed to know. The swarm was not invincible. They were afraid and desperate and far from home. And they had just made a big mistake. They had shown Jake their weakness. Jake's virus had worked better than anyone expected. When he touched the alien computer on the new horizon, he had not just planted a virus. He had created something new. The virus made him invisible to the swarm's shared mind. They could not sense him anymore, even when he was standing right next to them. But the virus did more than make him invisible. It let him connect to their network. Jake could see what the swarm saw. He could feel what they felt. He knew where they were going before they got there. For the first time in their long history, the swarm had a blind spot, and they did not even know it. Jake used this advantage to start his war. Not the kind of war Admiral Kate Davis wanted with big ships and lots of guns. This was a different kind of war. A war of small cuts and missing pieces. A war that would make the swarm's greatest strength become their greatest weakness. The first target was a communication relay near Jupiter. The swarm had taken it over and turned it into one of their living structures. Jake snuck inside while the aliens were sleeping. He did not try to destroy the relay. Instead, he changed one small part of the computer code. Just a few numbers in the program that controlled how messages were sent. When the swarm tried to send messages through the relay the next day, the messages came out wrong. Orders to attack Earth became orders to return home. Reports about human ship movements became reports about alien ship movements. The confusion spread through the network like fire. 3 swarm fleets turned around and started attacking each other by mistake. 2 more fleets got lost when their navigation data was scrambled. The aliens did not understand what was happening. Their perfect communication system was telling them lies. Jake moved to the next target, a mining station on Europa that the swarm had captured. This time he changed the programs that controlled the station's defenses. When a swarm supply ship arrived, the station's guns opened fire on it. The ship tried to send a message asking why they were being attacked, but the communication relay sent back a message saying the ship was full of human spies. The swarm was starting to panic. Their shared mind was getting conflicting information. Some aliens thought humans had developed new weapons. Others thought there were traitors in the swarm. A few began to suspect that their network had been infected with something they could not detect. Jake met with the human resistance fighters who were still alive in the occupied territories. Pete. Nash was hiding in the underground tunnels of Mars with 50 other people. He had been a construction worker before the war. Now he was building bombs and planning raids on alien supply lines. Grace Fox had escaped from Europa when the swarm attacked the mining colonies. She knew every cave and tunnel on the frozen moon. She had been leading small groups of survivors in hit-and-run attacks against alien patrols. Leo Barnes had been a Navy pilot before his ship was destroyed in the first battle with the swarm. Now he flew a stolen alien craft using their own technology against them. He had learned to think like the enemy and use their tactics. Jake taught them how to disrupt the swarm network, not with computers or viruses, but with simple tricks that confused the aliens. Grace's teams would move supplies from one location to another. When the swarm came looking for the supplies, they would find empty rooms. Pete's people would change road signs and markers so alien patrols would get lost in their own territory. The small disruptions were adding up to big problems. The swarm network depended on perfect information. When that information became unreliable, the network started to break down. Aliens began to doubt the messages they received. Some started making their own decisions instead of following orders from the collective mind. This was exactly what Jake wanted. The swarm's strength came from thinking and acting as one giant entity. But when parts of that entity started thinking for themselves, the whole system became weak and confused. The swarm tried to adapt as they always did. They sent out teams to check on the communication relays. They put guards on important installations. They started sending messages through multiple channels to make sure they were accurate. But Jake stayed one step ahead. He would disable the guards while they were sleeping. He would change the backup systems while the main systems were being repaired. He would send false messages that seemed to come from the swarm leaders themselves. The aliens began operating in smaller groups to reduce the confusion. This made them easier for human resistance fighters to attack. A fleet of 1,000 ships was too strong for humans to fight. But 10 groups of 100 ships could be defeated one at a time. Jake realized he was changing the nature of the war. Instead of one big enemy, humans now faced many smaller enemies. The swarm was still dangerous, but they were no longer invincible. But the aliens were learning too. They started using communication methods that did not depend on their network. They began operating more like individual hunters instead of parts of a collective mind. Some groups even stopped sharing information with other groups to prevent Jake from spreading false data. This created a new problem. Jake's virus let him see what the connected parts of the swarm were doing. But the disconnected groups were invisible to him, just like he was invisible to them. The war was becoming a game of hide-and-seek played across the solar system. Jake knew he needed to end this before the swarm adapted completely. He had found something in their ancient memories that might be the key. The force that had driven them from their home galaxy was still out there, still waiting. The swarm had been running from it for thousands of years, but maybe it was time for them to stop running. The plan that formed in Jake's mind was dangerous beyond belief. He would have to go to the center of the galaxy where the ancient enemy waited. He would have to wake something that might be worse than the swarm. But it might be the only way to save humanity. Jake sent messages to Pete, Grace, and Leo telling them to be ready. Soon the war would change again. The swarm thought they were fighting for their survival. Jake was about to show them what survival really meant. He looked out at the stars and wondered if he was making the right choice. The ancient force at the galactic center had defeated the swarm once. Maybe it could do so again. Or maybe Jake was about to make the biggest mistake in human history, but his friends had died fighting for humanity's future. Jake would not let their sacrifice be meaningless. Whatever waited at the Galactic Center, Jake would face it, even if it killed him, even if it killed everyone. The final phase of the war was about to begin. The journey to the Galactic Center took Jake 3 weeks in the fastest ship Earth could build. As he got closer to the massive black hole at the galaxy's heart, he started picking up signals. Old signals that had been broadcasting for millions of years. The signals were not random noise, they were patterns, messages, warnings. Jake found the source of the signals floating in space near the black hole. It was a structure so large it made planets look small. The outside was made of materials Jake had never seen before. Metal that seemed to bend light and stone that pulsed with its own energy. This was the fortress of the ancient civilization that had defeated the swarm long ago. When Jake's ship got close to the structure, it suddenly came to life. Lights turned on in patterns across its surface. Docking bays opened like giant mouths. A voice spoke to him in perfect English, even though the civilization that built this place had died before Earth was formed. "Welcome, human," the voice said. "I am the Guardian. I have been waiting for someone like you for a very long time." Jake docked his ship and walked into the structure. Inside, it was like a city and a library and a museum all at once. There were halls full of information about thousands of civilizations. Most of them had been destroyed by the swarm over millions of years. The Guardian appeared as a hologram that looked almost human. It explained that it was an artificial intelligence left behind by a species called the Builders. The Builders had created the Guardian to watch for the swarm's return and stop them from destroying more civilizations. The swarm used to be like you, the Guardian told Jake. Individual minds working together, but they became addicted to the power of the collective consciousness. They began absorbing other species not just to survive, but because they could not stop themselves. We had to drive them away to save what was left of the galaxy. Jake learned that the weapon the Guardian controlled was not just a weapon, it was a device that could sever the quantum connections that held the swarm's collective mind together. When used properly, it would force the aliens back into individual consciousness. But there was a cost. To operate the device, Jake would need to connect his own mind to it. The process would use his neural patterns as a template for breaking the swarm network. He might survive, but his mind would never be the same. He might not survive at all. Jake thought about his crew again. Lisa, Tony, Amy, Ryan, and Sam had died to send a warning to Earth. Now Jake had a chance to do more than warn. He could save everyone, but it would probably cost him his life. Before he could make his decision, alerts started going off throughout the Guardian's fortress. The swarm was coming. Their entire fleet was moving toward the Galactic Center, 1,000,000 ships carrying billions of individual alien organisms, all connected in one vast mind. "They know you are here," the Guardian said. "They can sense that their ancient enemy has awakened. They are bringing everything they have for the final battle." Jake looked out through the fortress windows at space. He could see the swarm fleet approaching like a dark cloud blocking out the stars. Ships of every size and type, all grown from the same organic technology, all controlled by the same collective intelligence. The Guardian began charging its weapon. But Jake was already thinking of something else. The weapon was designed to break the swarm's network. But what if instead of just breaking it, Jake could improve it? What if he could use human creativity to turn a defensive system into something better? Jake connected his mind to the Guardian's weapon system. Instantly, he could feel the power of the ancient device flowing through his thoughts. But instead of just following the original design, Jake began making changes. He used human intuition and adaptability to modify systems that had been unchanged for millions of years. The swarm fleet surrounded the fortress and began their attack. Millions of weapons fired at once. The Guardian's shields held, but they would not last long against so many enemies. Jake finished his modifications to the weapon just as the shields failed. The swarm began boarding the fortress from every direction. Alien warriors poured through the halls where Jake had walked just hours before. But Jake was ready. He activated the modified weapon and sent its signal out toward the swarm fleet. The quantum field spread from ship to ship faster than light. In seconds, it had reached every alien in the galaxy. The effect was immediate and terrible. 1,000,000. Individual minds that had been connected for thousands of years were suddenly alone. Aliens who had never had to think for themselves were forced to become individuals again. The collective consciousness that had made them so strong shattered into 1,000,000,000 frightened fragments. Panic spread through the swarm fleet. Pilots forgot how to fly their ships. Soldiers forgot how to use their weapons. The perfect coordination that had made them unstoppable disappeared in an instant. Ships crashed into each other as their crews struggled to remember how to be separate beings. Jake had survived the process, but barely. His mind felt like it had been taken apart and put back together wrong. The Guardian helped him to a chair as alarms continued to sound throughout the fortress. "It is done," the Guardian said. "The swarm's collective consciousness has been destroyed. They are individuals now whether they want to be or not." Jake looked out at the battlefield. The swarm fleet was in chaos. Some ships were trying to retreat, but their crews could not agree on where to go. Other ships were floating dead in space as their crews fought each other. The mighty swarm had become a confused mob in the space of seconds. But something unexpected was happening too. Some of the aliens were trying to communicate, not through their quantum network but with simple radio signals. They were scared and confused, but they were trying to talk to each other. Trying to help each other. Learning to cooperate instead of just being connected. Over the following weeks, Jake watched from the Guardian's fortress as the scattered swarm groups slowly learned to be individuals again. It was not easy for them. Many died because they could not function without the collective mind, but others began to adapt. They formed small groups based on friendship instead of genetic programming. They made choices based on personal preference instead of network commands. Some groups tried to rebuild the collective consciousness. But without the quantum connections, it was impossible. They had to learn to trust each other the way humans did. Through words and actions instead of shared thoughts, the war was over. Not because one side had defeated the other, but because the enemy had been changed into something else. The swarm that had threatened humanity no longer existed. In its place were billions of confused but potentially friendly individuals. Jake eventually returned to Earth as a hero. But he brought with him an unexpected request. A small group of former swarm aliens wanted to come to human space. They called themselves the Awakened, and they wanted to learn how to be individuals while still working together. It took years of negotiation, but eventually Earth agreed to let some of the Awakened settle on a few remote planets. They proved to be quick learners. Without their collective consciousness, they had to develop creativity and independence. They became artists and inventors and philosophers. Some even became friends with humans. Jake often visited the awakened colonies. He had lost his crew to the swarm, but in a strange way, he had gained something too. The aliens he had once fought were now people he could talk to and understand. They struggled with loneliness and doubt and hope, just like humans did. The title of his story had proven true. One human against 1,000,000 enemies really had been no contest. Not because Jake was stronger or smarter than the swarm, but because he understood something they had forgotten, the power of being an individual while choosing to work with others, the strength that came from being alone but not lonely. The swarm had thought their collective consciousness made them superior. But they had lost the ability to change and grow as individuals. Jake had given them back their individuality. In return, they gave humanity something precious, the knowledge that cooperation was a choice, not a compulsion. The galaxy was at peace for the first time in millions of years, and it had all started with one human who refused to give up his right to be himself.